Hi there, and welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. There's a really fascinating dynamic that I want to look at today, and it tells us a lot about how kind of subject populations, colonized populations, when they are kind of crushed between two empires, sometimes react to the circumstances that they've been dealt. In this case, I want to look at what the Arab peoples of Mesopotamia, or Iraq as we understand it today, did when they were invaded by the British. Of course, they are already colonized by Turkey, by the Ottomans, and the British that had begun inroads into Basra in 1915 push forward their advance all the way up to Kut al-Amara, where they meet with catastrophe. But for the first part of the campaign, everything is pointing in Britain's direction. As an aside, Kut al-Amara was used in, or the memory of Kut al-Amara was used in 2003 when um, Britain under Tony Blair joined in with George W. Bush's war crime invasion of Iraq. And the veteran journalist of the Middle East, Robert Fisk, referred to Tony Blair as Lord Blair of Kut al-Amara. And there were a surprising number of British journalists and politicos that had no idea what he meant. And that, I would say, is the problem. So we're looking today at Eugene Rogan's book, The Fall of the Ottomans. And I have said about this book that for what a single volume, it's kind of not a doorstep book, but a single volume book on the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. It's really kind of second to none. It's such a good book, and I would recommend it to anybody that really wants to know about that period. So at this point, as the British begin to make inroads into Mesopotamia, that they were particularly keen on occupying for its oil, um, they had already endured disaster at Gallipoli throughout 1915. Um, Victory at Gallipoli freed thousands of Ottoman soldiers for service on other crucial fronts. With the imperial capital secured, Enver Pasha could finally satisfy his field officers' urgent demands for reinforcements. The ravaged Ottoman army in the Caucasus received 7 infantry divisions to ward off the Russian threat. Kemal Pasha's forces in Syria and Palestine had been depleted for service in the Dardanelles. 4 divisions were dispatched to the Levant to restore the Fourth Army to its full strength. In Mesopotamia, the Ottomans had fielded an ill-trained and poorly supplied troops in the face of the Anglo-Indian juggernaut. The deployment of 2 experienced and disciplined divisions from Gallipoli to Baghdad, it was hoped, would shift the balance of power in Mesopotamia in the Ottomans' favour. The Ottoman position in Mesopotamia had deteriorated alarmingly in the aftermath of Suleiman Askari's defeat at Shaiba in April 1915. This is obviously covered earlier in the book. High rates of desertion amongst Iraqi recruits exacerbated losses through heavy battlefield casualties, leaving Ottoman forces severely under strength. Ottoman commanders in Mesopotamia had no choice but to go from town to town, rounding up deserters under the threat of exemplary punishment. Turkish officers, who regarded Arab recruits as unreliable in the best of circumstances, had few illusions about the military value of deserters reconscripted by force. They would be surprised, however, by the ferocity of the Iraqi deserters' resistance to the recruiting parties sent to reclaim them for the Ottoman war effort. So, obviously, a significant proportion of the makeup of Ottoman armies was non-Turkish. There were Arab soldiers, there were soldiers from what remained of the Ottoman European holdings. There were soldiers from North Africa, um, and so Arab soldiers were quite often relied upon. And there were, of course, as we will look at, Armenian soldiers too, and Armenian civilians, um, and they became there have been long-standing suspicions about the Armenians and their pro-Russian leanings, which explode into the Armenian genocide in 1915, which is covered in a different part of the book. It's a really really powerful account of the forces that drive the Armenian genocide. So there were several complicated different relationships between the Ottomans and the different Arab peoples of their empire. In some instances, they wanted the Egyptian Arabs to rise up in jihad against the British. In some instances, they were very wary of the Iraqi Arabs and very dubious about their fighting qualities. There were the Arab tribes of the Hijaz and other parts of what becomes Saudi Arabia. Um, some of them were loyal initially to the Ottomans. So the relationship between colonizer and colonized, as you find in every imperial situation, is very complex and nuanced and fluid and changing, because it relies on people, particularly in wartime, making decisions about the future of their tribe, their society, their people. Starting in May, the towns and villages of the Middle Euphrates rose in rebellion, that ran for the final 2 years of Ottoman rule over Mesopotamia. The first rebellion broke out in the city of Najaf, a pilgrimage site for Shiite Muslims, and a refuge for hundreds of Iraqi deserters who sought asylum within the walls of the shrine city. Iraq's Shiite communities had grown increasingly disaffected with their Sunni Ottoman rulers, resentful of being drawn into a global war that was increasingly disrupting their lives. The clampdown on deserters brought matters to a head, and when the Ottoman governor in Baghdad dispatched a large force to Najaf under an Iraqi officer named Izzet Bey to round up malingerers hiding in the ancient city's quarters, resentment boiled over into rebellion. The Ottoman commander announced a 3-day amnesty for all deserters who handed themselves in. Given that desertion was punishable by death, Izzet Bey had reason to hope that the Iraqis would take advantage of this reprieve and return to military service voluntarily. Yet most of the deserters had fled from Najaf before Izzet Bey's arrival, and few, if any, remained in the town to surrender. After 3 days, the Ottoman commander decided to send his troops to conduct house-to-house searches. The Ottoman soldiers outraged the conservative women of Najaf by checking under their veils to ensure they were not men hiding in women's clothes. The townspeople protested this assault against the honour of their women and waited for the right moment to exact their revenge. On the night of the 22nd of May 1915, a band of deserters descended on Najaf with their guns blazing and laid siege to the government buildings and army barracks. The townspeople made common cause with the rebels as deserters from the surrounding countryside converged on Najaf to make a stand against the Ottomans and the global war they had imposed on the unwilling people of Iraq. The battle raged for 3 days, while the rebels systematically destroyed government offices and records. That is a key feature of rebellions almost wherever you look. It seems to kind of transcend any national boundary, that the first thing you do is you go and burn the government's source of information. And that might be the government's records of who's in the city, so who can be held to account or press ganged or arrested and hanged afterwards. And you also burn down property rights. It's a great opportunity to make it almost impossible to know who owns what or who doesn't own what. And it's a particularly great opportunity to destroy property rights and ledgers of debt about who owes what. And it shows you how ordinary people understand the power that the administrative state has over them. All communication between Najaf and other administrative centres was severed, as tribesmen in the surrounding countryside cut lines and uprooted telegraph poles. With the surviving Ottoman soldiers and officials besieged in a handful of government buildings, the heads of the town quarters sent criers throughout the streets of Najaf, calling on merchants to open their stores and resume business as usual. Alarmed, the governor in Baghdad sent a delegation to confer with the townspeople. In a meeting of the town's leaders, the Ottoman delegates reminded the Najafis that the Ottoman Empire faced a life or death war against infidel invaders, and that it was every Muslim's religious duty to assist in the struggle. For their part, the Najafis placed full responsibility for the situation on the Ottomans themselves and stubbornly refused all of the delegation's requests. In the end, the Ottomans were left to negotiate the safe withdrawal of their besieged soldiers and officials from Najaf and appointed a skeleton administration to keep a semblance of Ottoman rule over the shrine city. However, the people of Najaf took over effective government, with the town gaining a high degree of independence from Ottoman rule. Encouraged by Najaf's example, so there are several other key towns in the Middle Euphrates region rose in rebellion against the Ottomans in the summer of 1915. For the people of Karbala, another Shiite shrine city, rebellion became a matter of civic pride. Are the people of Najaf better than us, or braver or more manly? They asked rhetorically. Once again, a group of deserters launched a rebellion on the 27th of June, burning down the municipal buildings, schools, and even a new hospital in Karbala. 200 houses in one of the new quarters of the town were put to the torch, driving mostly Persian inhabitants to take refuge in the older quarters. Rebels and Bedouin from nearby tribes began to fight amongst themselves over the distribution of plunder as the chaos descended on Karbala. Once again, the Ottomans were forced to negotiate a controlled handover to a local rule. The Ottomans put up a desperate fight in the town of Al-Hilla, but found themselves outnumbered by waves of Bedouin and deserters. In Samawah, the town's notables broke their pledge of loyalty sworn on the Quran to the district governor when they learned of the approach of the British in August 1915. A detachment of 90 local soldiers deserted en masse, while the townspeople and Bedouin turned on the Turkish soldiers within their midst. And the entire cavalry detachment of 180 men was stripped of their weapons, horses, and clothes and driven from the town stark naked. Similar events took place in Al-Kufa, Al-Shamia, and Tawairij.
With Chase Sapphire Reserve for Business, you'll turn every meeting, every mile, and every meal into momentum. Chase Sapphire Reserve for Business, the business card that gives back all you put in. Visit chase.com/reserve business to learn more. Cards issued by JPMorgan Chase Bank, N.A. member FDIC, subject to credit approval. Terms apply.
Ever notice how life's best stories don't happen in your living room? They happen on the open road, out on the water, or parked under the stars. At Progressive, they get that you want to focus on the experience, not worry about the what-ifs. That's why they offer quality insurance designed for your ride, whether that's a boat, RV, or motorcycle. Adventure with confidence. Visit Progressive.com and see how easy it is to protect your favorite way to get away. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in D.C. Prices vary based on how you buy.
In the end, their futile efforts to force deserters to return to active service cost the Ottomans the Euphrates basin. I guess with the Ottomans, I mean, a lot of this is born of desperation. Some kind of ham-fistedness, some sort of colonial arrogance, but a lot of it sheer desperation. The Ottomans in late 1914 had been trying to avoid the war, and they would probably have sided with any power that could have kept them out of it, that they could have supported passively. They didn't want a war. The Ottoman Empire had been under assault since 1908, and it was something that they sought desperately to avoid. 1911, sorry. And so the crises of the Ottoman Empire meant that by 1914, this is a kind of an imperium that's on its last legs, and it does surprisingly well for the first couple of years. They fail in trying to seize Egypt, and they fail in their first campaign at Sarakamis against the Russians, but they defeat the British and the French in their combined empires in the Dardanelles, and they defeat the British at Kut al Amara. So they're not doing too badly. And throughout the war, there's signs that the Ottomans are adapting and learning the new tactics of warfare. While the Ottomans faced internal rebellion, the British continued their relentless advance in Mesopotamia. Following its victory at Shaiba in April 1915, the Indian Expeditionary Force had received fresh troops and a new commander, General Sir John Nixon. Under orders to secure the whole of the Ottoman province of Basra, Nixon prepared to advance up the Tigris River to the strategic river port of Amara. With a population of some 10,000, Amara lay 90 miles north of Basra. After several weeks of preparation and planning, Nixon ordered the 6th Division into action under the command of Major General Charles Townsend. To break through Turkish lines north of Kurna, Townsend deployed hundreds of small native river craft as improvised troop transports, supported by British steamboats armed with cannons and machine guns. This unlikely armada, dubbed Townsend's Regatta, set off from Amara at dawn on the 31st of May. Between the artillery bombardment provided by the heaviest ships and the mass charges of men in native boats, the British managed to break through the Ottoman positions north of Kurna and proceed upriver unopposed by the retreating Ottoman defenders. The advancing British army found itself fighting on friendly territory. Arab villages along the Tigris flew white flags to demonstrate the good intentions towards the new conquerors, as the Ottoman retreat degenerated into a demoralized rout. So you have people between two empires who they do the only thing that they can possibly do, and that is to welcome the new power on their doorstep. On the 3rd of June, the advance guard of Townsend's Regatta reached the outskirts of Amara, where they found an estimated 3,000 Turkish troops attempting to withdraw in advance of the Anglo-Indian army. A British river steamer with a crew of only 8 sailors and armed with a 12-pound gun cruised up to Amara and challenged by Turkish defenders. The sudden appearance of a boat under a British ensign so demoralized the Turks that 11 officers and 250 men surrendered on the spot, while more than 2,000 Ottoman troops retreated upriver. General Townsend arrived by steamer late that afternoon and raised the Union Jack over the customs house, claiming victory in Amara before the main body of 1,500 troops had even reached the town.
When you own your own business, you own every decision.
Catch the red eye or take the 6 a.m.
Make a new hire or promote internally.
Celebrate a win with the toast at the gate or unwind at the lounge. Big props to this team.
Some decisions are a win-win, like earning 8 times points on Chase Travel. Chase Sapphire Reserve for Business, the business card that gives back all you put in. Visit chase.com/reserve business to learn more. Cards issued by JPMorgan Chase Bank and a member FDIC, subject to credit approval. Terms apply.
Adventures don't always go as planned. One minute you're cruising in your RV, the next your tire hits a massive pothole. Progressive is ready for you when the unexpected hits, with excellent claim service for your boat, RV, and motorcycle. Plus optional coverage like roadside assistance and on-the-water towing. Visit Progressive.com and make sure your next adventure is unforgettable for the right reasons. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Coverage is subject to policy terms and limits.
The surrender of hundreds of Turkish and Arab soldiers to an advanced party could have overcome could have overcome easily, reflected the collapse of Ottoman morale. So, can it be that the rebellions against the Ottomans and against Ottoman conscription had achieved that? Possibly. I would say possibly that's one of the factors. But I guess it's important to look at, and perhaps we won't be able to see that here, to look at the demographic makeup of those soldiers. Were they Iraqis? This is the key question. Were they Ottoman? Were they Turkish? How invested are they in fighting the British for every square inch of Ottoman territory? How had the basics of logistics, food, ammunition, the resupply of fresh troops, how had that all affected? How was all that functioning? I guess these are the kind of the variables and the questions that determine morale. When you suddenly have large numbers of soldiers surrendering en masse, it's often got less to do with the fearsomeness of the opposition and more to do with the point of continuing, what their material conditions are like, and how well they're looked after, and a host of other things. Following the capture of Amara, Nixon planned to advance up the Euphrates to occupy Nasiriyah and thereby complete the British conquest of the province of Basra. Nasiriyah was a new town established in the 1870s to serve as the marketplace to the powerful Muntafiq tribal confederation. Like Amara, it had a population of some 10,000. Nixon hoped to win over the powerful Euphrates Bedouin tribes by dealing the Turks a defeat, and believed that the Ottomans posed a clear and present danger to the British troops in Kurna and Basra as long as they held a garrison in Nasiriyah. Nixon's forces under General George Gorringe began to advance on Nasiriyah on the 27th of June. The lower Euphrates was still far more treacherous to navigate than the Tigris. In the course of the summer, the river typically dropped in depth from 5 feet in June to 3 feet by mid-July and became impassable by August. To secure ships of a sufficient shallow draft, the British were forced to recommission several obsolete paddle steamers to carry their troops upriver towards Nasiriyah. One of the British ships, the Shushan, was first commissioned for the relief of General Gordon of Khartoum in 1885. These ancient British steamboats struggled to cross a series of marshlands through ill-marked channels that grew alarmingly shallower week by week. And at this point, Mesopotamia or Iraq is best navigated by the Tigris and the Euphrates. It is a society, a civilization, if you will, built on river navigation. Despite the outbreak of the rebellions in Najaf and Karbala, the Ottomans mounted a spirited defence against the British on the lower Euphrates, with some 4,200 Turkish troops assisted by Bedouin tribesmen in well-defended positions outside Nasiriyah. They initially outnumbered the invaders. Unwilling to proceed against superior numbers, Gorringe called for the reinforcements and held his position until the third week of July, when his force reached full strength with some 4,600 infantrymen. The diminishing river, parts of which were close to navigation by late July, had delayed the dispatch of extra troops. With no prospect of further reinforcements by river, Gorringe had to make do with the forces he had at hand. The British mounted preliminary attacks on Ottoman positions outside Nasiriyah in early June. Ali Jawdat, a native of the northern Iraqi city of Mosul, was one of the Ottoman troops resisting the British advance. Jawdat was a professional soldier who had graduated from both Baghdad Military High School and the elite Harbiye Military Academy in Istanbul, before taking his commission in the Ottoman army. Despite his military training, however, Jawdat had mixed loyalties. He'd grown disenchanted with the Young Turk movement, and like many educated elites in the Arab provinces, aspired to greater Arab autonomy within the Ottoman Empire. He was a founding member of Al-Ahd, the Covenant, a secret society established after the 1913 Arab Congress in Paris. The military equivalent of Al-Fatah, the Young Arab Society, Al-Ahd, was particularly strong in Iraq, where it attracted many of the brightest young Arab officers. Like Fatah and the Decentralization Party, Al-Ahd called for Arab autonomy within a reformed Ottoman state rather than outright independence for fear of European colonial domination. With the outbreak of the Great War, Jawdat threw himself into the defence of the Ottoman Empire against the Entente powers with all the loyalty and determination of his Turkish compatriots. In 1915, Ali Jawdat had served with Suleiman Askari in the Battle of Shaiba. He retreated with Askari to Nasiriyah, and after his first commander's suicide, was put in charge of an Ottoman detachment near that town. The Ottomans were assisted by a powerful Bedouin leader, Ajami al-Sadun, whose tribesmen filled the thin Ottoman ranks confronting the British invaders. The tribesmen asked the Ottomans to provide them with ammunition, and the Jawdat was tasked with giving the Bedouin what they needed for the defence of Nasiriyah. When Gorringe's forces attacked Turkish lines in the Euphrates, Jawdat watched as the Bedouin irregulars took the measure of the situation and turned against the Ottomans. He saw tribesmen assault Ottoman soldiers and steal their rifles and ammunition. He saw the soldiers fall dead and wounded under intense British gunfire. The Ottoman soldiers were caught between two fires, Jawdat first wrote, from the Bedouin and the British. Isolated from the main Ottoman lines, Jawdat was himself ambushed by Bedouin tribesmen, who disarmed and robbed him before he was captured by the British in the village of Suk al-Shukaya near Nasiriyah. And so we'll take a pause there, because again, I think that instead of looking at the war in Mesopotamia as a war between simply the British and the Ottoman Turks, we have to look at how Mesopotamian Arabs fit into all the different dynamics that are happening between the two sides, and the nature of the territory, and the nature of the Bedouin, and particularly their nomadic nature, meant that how occupied peoples in Mesopotamia interacted with the two sides was very different than other fronts, say for example in Europe. There we'll leave things, and I'll catch you on the next Explaining History podcast, and take care. All the best. Bye bye.
At Amica Insurance, we know it's not just about where you're going, but who you go with. That's why we work even harder to protect what matters most. And as a mutual insurance company, we're built for our customers and prioritize your needs. Amica, empathy is our best policy. Visit amica.com and get a quote today.
You might not think about oil and natural gas, but it's a big part of your daily routine. From the soap you use to your toothpaste, even your bed sheets. More than 6,000 everyday products are made using oil and natural gas. Companies like Energy Transfer work behind the scenes, safely transporting these resources across the country through a network of underground pipelines. Learn more at ittakesenergy.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Explaining History. This podcast is an independent production, and it's listener support that keeps these conversations going week after week. If you find value in the show and want to help cover the costs of research and production, please consider making a contribution. You can join our community on Patreon or make a one-off donation. Just follow the links in the show notes for this episode. Every bit of support is truly appreciated. Thanks again for listening.